thinking we should introduce French food into his diet. It might enhance his study of the language. So tomorrow night, why don't you make him coquille Saint-Jacques for dinner, Dry cleaning.
Scarlett Johansson takes on the job from hell. I'm Richard Roeper, and filling in for Roger this week is the host of HDNet's Higher Definition and the film critic for the Village Voice chain of newspapers, Mr. Robert Wolanski. Welcome back, sir.
The pleasure is all yours. Thank you.
Well, we'll find out about that, won't we? All right. First up is the Nanny Diaries. It's softer and more hopeful than the novel, and that's too bad. There are some knowing insights and a few sharp satirical jabs here, but there's more caricature than character development. At 22, Scarlett Johansson has an amazing resume of movies, but does she have star power? She's okay here as Annie, a college grad who takes a temporary job as a nanny, but imagine someone like a young Sandra Bullock or Julia Roberts or Meg Ryan in this role.
What are you doing in that bathtub? And why are your bags strewn all over the guest room?
I thought that was my room.
No, Nanny.
Now, that's Laura Linney. She's a first-rate actress, of course. She's kind of saddled here, though, with a one-dimensional role that makes her seem more like a neurotic idiot than a scheming socialite. The wonderful Paul Giamatti is miscast as Linney's husband, a casually cruel jerk who's having an affair.
Oh, why is Daddy tickling that lady?
I'm sorry, Greer just had to use the bathroom.
So you sit already.
Hello, Greer. Remember me? I work with your daddy in the Chicago office.
Let go. I have to make a duty.
Chris Evans plays the Harvard hunk that lives in the same building as Annie's nanny family. He's supposed to be a nice guy, but if he's a nice guy, why are his friends such unbelievable jerks?
Are you hot for the dads? Or the dads hot for you?
Hey, come on.
You want to know about the dads? I'll tell you about the dads. They're chubby, bald, steak-eating, cigar-smoking type A pigs who get more turned on by the Bloomberg wire than they do by any hot nannies.
The Nanny Diaries is the kind of movie that will play smoothly on home video. You get some good one-liners, a storyline that goes down easy, some attractive New York cinematography, but so what? The moment it's over, it just kind of vaporizes. It's so light and inconsequential, it just floats out of your memory. And the ending is too tidy and upbeat, as if created by a test screening audience working with a marketing team. It's not a bad film, it's just not worth your $10. That's my opinion, and I'm sticking to it.
You know, I just wanted to run out of this theater and go watch for the 532nd time The Devil Wears Prada. Because that's all this thing is. It's just The Devil Wears Prada stuck in a different location. Instead of a New York fashion magazine, it's a New York apartment. Yeah. In fact, this is the kind of movie that is so shallow and simple that it actually has a Devil Wears Prada joke in it. Paul Giamatti's mother is reading it on the beach.
You know, and here's the thing, Robert, those books came out roughly the same time. They were both huge bestsellers, and I try to keep up with all things pop culture, so I actually read both books. And I think in the case of The Devil Wears Prada, they made it a better material with Meryl Streep and with Anne Hathaway and just the style of the film. And I think in this case, The Nanny Diaries actually had a little bit more of an acerbic edge to it, and they took that away, and it's worse for the wear instead of better. So, I mean, it's definitely in the same category, but I agree with you. The Devil Wears Prada is a much better film.
The great thing about The Devil Wears Prada is that it's one of the best movies I have ever seen about work. That is a great film about what it means to be successful, what it means to make choices in life. There's the great Stanley Tucci line, which is that the more successful you become, the more your life falls apart. Well, here, Scarlett Johansson's life falls apart, but to what end? It means nothing. It's an absolutely hollow film with a hollow performance, and I have to say, this may be the most disappointing second film by filmmakers who made a great movie, because this is the same filmmakers who brought us American Splendor.
Right, absolutely, and that was a terrific film. And you know, the thing about Scarlett Johansson, as I mentioned, you know, she's got more Woody Allen stuff coming out. She's been in all these terrific films and has had A-list co-stars. I'm still not convinced, and I've said this on this show before, that she's a good actress. I mean, there's a certain kind of
what gives it away?
There's well, the
fact she can't act.
The wooden level of the performance. Well, you know, a lot of people who really know what they're doing keep casting her in big movies. So there are a lot of people who think she can act, but I see a performance like this, and it just, as I mentioned, actresses of the last generation who played those kind of, you know, sweetheart roles were so much better and more likable than she is here.
I will say this: her performing style has evolved over the last few years. She used to have the range from A to B. Now she's got A to A, so I think there has been an evolution.
That's lovely.
Well, next up is Illegal Tender, which is actually funnier than The Nanny Diaries. And for the sake of argument, I'll assume it's supposed to play as a comedy. How else to explain Wanda de Jesus' over-the-top performance as Millie de Leon? The wife of a gunned-down drug dealer who years later is still trying to dodge the bullets of baddies after her late husband's loot. De Jesus is sort of a Latina Foxy Brown, a pistol-packing mama who apparently has an endless supply of Connecticut mansions into which she can move her 2 sons. Here she is showing the eldest, named Wilson, played by old school's Rick Gonzalez, her vault full of pistols.
I'm not leaving everything that I have here. I'm not leaving Anna. I'm not leaving school. Nothing. For some Tony Montana that doesn't exist.
Tony Montana that doesn't exist, huh? Why don't you feel that?
The action bounces from Queens in the 1980s to modern-day New England with a couple of detours to Puerto Rico, where straight-laced Wilson faces off against the man who did in his dad. Wilson also has other issues to juggle, chiefly his girlfriend Anna, who doesn't seem to mind her straight-A boyfriend's newfound attachment to firearms.
This is the first time in my life I look in my mom's eyes and she don't know what to do. And I've never seen her like that. I gotta do this, okay? I gotta do this.
Who do you think you are?
Her son.
Produced by John Singleton and directed by Frank Reyes, whose first name is punctuated with a period, a sure sign of artistic restraint. Illegal Tender is little more than an updating of the exploitation pics of yore. The bad guys all have heavy lids and heavier accents, and the good guys all have their own dirty little secrets. Reyes thinks he's bringing something new to the creaky genre. Artsy flourishes, a salsa soundtrack, but it is the same old silliness without the drive and appeal. And while I'd like to recommend any movie in which mom's got a cache of weapons down in the basement, Richard, I'd have to say Illegal Tender is an absolute failure.
So this director, he has a period after his first name, after the Frank.
Reyes.
Okay. Let's start off with a question mark. What the hell were they thinking? I'll add a period. This movie sucks.
I mean, really trying to
Robert, what in God's name was going on with this movie? You want to talk about bad acting? You're right. I mean, the performances are so bad that I thought at one point maybe they were doing a very sly tribute to 70s blaxploitation flicks with the music and stuff like that.
What's going on here.
But it's not funny enough to do that. And as something resembling some kind of plot, it's beyond ridiculous. I mean, it's like a bad Miami Vice script that never got made because it was too overwrought and too silly. It's so bad that if it's ever on, I have like people over, I'd be like, you gotta watch this for 5 minutes, because this is like when you tell me I have the best job in the world, watch 5 minutes of this and multiply it by 20, and that's what I have to sit through sometimes.
But if you show them by accident, if you show them the scene where she comes out of the house with guns blazing as guys are coming up, shooting at the house in broad daylight.
Yeah, oh yeah. The worst gunman ever.
It's an absolute amazing scene and an absolute astoundingly bad film.
It's an insanely horrible film.
Later in the show, Rowan Atkinson stars in Mr. Bean's Holiday, and next, Josh Hartnett is duped by Samuel L. Jackson in Resurrecting the Champ.
I just saw him last time. Who's that you're fighting there, champ?
Satterfield versus Kincaid. Tommy Kincaid. Never had it in him to hurt a man. That was his problem. He had skills, though. Hell.
Next up, Resurrecting the Champ. Now, at times we see glimpses of a memorable film here, but that movie is never fully realized. Despite one great performance and an intriguing setup, the work is crippled by another performance that's nowhere near great, and a storyline that makes it impossible to root for the leading man. Josh Hartnett seems like an earnest actor and a nice guy, but he's consistently stiff on screen, and he's terrible here with no emotional range. He plays Eric, a mediocre sports writer in Denver.
You know what would be good for the story? If I could look at some of the stuff on your cart, see what you lug around every day. And then I think it'd be really interesting for the article.
All right, we can do that. As soon as you take me to your house, let me go through all your personal stuff.
Now, that's Samuel L. Jackson, who does tremendous work as the Champ, a former contender who's now living on the streets. The Champ story could be Eric's ticket to a career upgrade, but a library assistant seems to do all the real work for Eric.
Good. He's the only one Satterfield thought that I could find. Most of them are dead. I took the liberty of setting up an interview time with him.
When?
Today at 4.
An interview with the Raging Bull.
And Satterfield Jr. of Chicago. Only living relative.
Now, Robert, I've worked at a newspaper for 20 years, and that scene is pure fantasy. I've also worked in TV for just a little bit, and I've never met an exec who remotely resembles the cartoon Viper played by Terry Hatcher.
Your loss.
There is no journalism anymore. There's no news. The people who cling to the hopes that they can inform the world are only slightly less naive than the people who think they can pray their way out of a tsunami.
Resurrecting the Champ is based on an unforgettable article by J.R. Moringer. in the nonfiction story as well as the movie, the champ's true identity comes into question. But the real-life writer handled the situation like a pro, whereas the movie version takes us down a path that feels completely implausible and worse, makes us actively root against Eric. He might be the world's worst journalist. He lies to his son, he lies to his bosses, he lies to the world, and I did not believe in this guy's redemption. The scenes with his kid are cringe-inducing. The kid can't act, and he talks like a miniature adult. I really wanted to admire this film. I really liked the setup, but I didn't buy into any of it.
You know, I think this is a great movie about journalism because it pegs in so many ways what journalism movies really should be about, which is nothing. They're about people researching stories. They're about people doing interviews and getting to know your subject. And that's not very exciting,
yeah, but
much like Resurrecting the Champ.
But here's the thing, Robert. You take a movie like All the President's Men, which is just a procedural, and it's thrilling as hell.
Wait. I didn't say this was a good movie.
So you can take the job of journalist and turn it into a great movie. And this story, the real-life story about this guy and whether or not he was really Satterfield, the guy who fought LaMotta and Ezra Charles, or if he was somebody else, that's intriguing enough. But instead they turn into this whole thing where, I mean, this guy he's a terrible journalist, he's a jerk, and it's just not very interesting.
Well, that's the problem, and I'm not saying this is a great film by any stretch. In fact, what makes All the President's Men and Shattered Glass, which is sort of the reverse image of All the President's Men, is that they're thrillers, and they can find sort of the thrilling aspect of what we do. But this actually gets it right because most of the time it's pretty damn tedious, you know just like this movie.
It doesn't get it right because you've got this guy who's a terrible writer, and he's got this magical library assistant who does all the work for him.
But not enough, clearly.
You have this whole thing with the Showtime executive played by Terry Hatcher. This guy gets a TV gig like that, and everybody talks like as if being a boxing commentator for Showtime is like being the host of The Tonight Show. Like it's the greatest gig ever, and he does a terrible job as the Showtime commentator, but everybody tells him he's a star, and his kid's at home watching, and it's just a disaster.
But this is directed by Rod Lurie, who makes movies about the most amazingly outrageous things: nuclear war and deterrence. He had the film.
But I like The Contender quite a bit.
So you like The Contender? I'm not a big fan of The Contender.
Yeah,
I think he finds the most overwrought moments in the most mundane things, or he tries to anyway. He tries to drum up incredibly big moments.
There could be a great story here, and I think they mucked it up with the screenplay.
I don't disagree with that.
That's what I'm saying there, and the leading man. Coming up next, rival geeks duke it out in The King of Kong.
There's no way to defeat them.
We went to a nightclub.
You got in.
We got right in.
Looking at movies now in theaters, Superbad is hilarious. I think The Invasion is probably the worst remake of the Invasion of the Body Snatchers franchise, and Death at a Funeral was deadly, in my opinion.
You know, I can't disagree about all of those, but I think Superbad is just super okay. That's just me. Take out 30 minutes, you got a classic film. I think it's a little too long.
You can get a little home editing kit and make it better when you get it on DVD.
I actually have my kid working on it right now. I've got a sweatshop.
Good luck with that.
You know, when I first saw the trailer for our next movie, I thought surely it was headed direct to airplane. There was no way Mr. Bean's Holiday was getting a theatrical release. Not on this planet, anyway. But go figure, a decade after we thought ourselves rid of Rowan Atkinson's bumbling and mumbling moron, he resurfaces in France, where perhaps Atkinson is hailed as a misunderstood genius, in which case, pardonnez-moi. Actually, most of France finds Atkinson as annoying as I do. The storyline finds Mr. Bean in France after he wins a church raffle in London. I think it was rigged myself, the Brits' way of burying Bean in someone else's yard. But several mix-ups later, on his way to Cannes, Bean winds up with the son of a famous director also heading to the film festival. And good God help us all, wacky hijinks ensue as they try to raise a few francs for their train ride to the coast. It's rated G, but I think my 4-year-old son said it best. This is boring, Dad, he told me, right before he and his mom walked out of the screening. My kid actually told me to tell you, Richard, this movie sucks.
Well, you know, the amazing thing is you subjected your family to this movie, and I'm going to contact the Department of Children and Family Services and talk about grounds for removal. I hate Mr. Bean. I hated this movie. He's an annoying, creepy, leering, sweaty, unfunny character, and 10 seconds would be too much, and this movie's like 90 minutes. So it was just pure pain, and I'm glad it's over. Let's put it behind us, shall we?
I'm trying. I'm in therapy.
Let's move on, my friend, to something much Much better.
Oh, good.
Now, compared to such big-issue documentaries as The 11th Hour and No End in Sight, The King of Kong is almost ludicrously trivial. It's about Donkey Kong, but you know what? It's also one of the most fascinating films of the year, and it deserves an Oscar nomination for Best Documentary. Without mocking his subjects, director Seth Gordon takes us into the seventh circle of geekdom. This is a world where real-life versions of McLovin from Superbad continue to obsess over arcade game rivalries and record scores, even as they hit their mid-30s and beyond.
And you've got to get past all the barrels, the fireballs, get up the ladders, and get up to Fay Ray. And as soon as you get to her, Donkey Kong takes her away to the next level.
The average Donkey Kong game doesn't last a minute. It's absolute brutality.
Looking like the long-lost missing member of Three Dog Night, Billy Mitchell is the Donkey Kong King, a master manipulator. Challenger Steve Wiebe is a hard-luck good guy who sets a record in his garage, but that record becomes the source of great controversy.
Any board that's worked on could have a problem.
To find out that this gamer potentially has a fraudulent score has upset Billy's master plan for what he wanted to do.
With his reputation on the line, Wiebe shows up at a major gaming expo and takes aim at the record.
We have a verified score on a legitimate Donkey Kong machine for Steve Wiebe now.
At times, King of Kong plays like a really good Christopher Guest film. Whether you have logged thousands of hours playing arcade and video games, or you'd rather sleep on a bed of nails than play one round of Pac-Man, this movie will fascinate and entertain. It's funny, it's an intriguing story, and there's genuine suspense here. I love this film.
My favorite movie of the year.
Wow.
There's just something about it. And I have to say, I've seen it like 6 or 7 times at this point. Everyone I've ever seen it with, they all, for the first 15, 20 minutes, are convinced it's a mockumentary.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're convinced that there's no way this actually happened. What's been really interesting is to see in the last couple of months how Billy Mitchell is trying to defend himself. Brought MTV News down to do a piece on him about the fact that, look, I'm not really this big of a jerk. He is an astounding villain. And Wiebe is an incredibly heartbreaking character. This guy fails at everything except this one thing.
Yeah, it's like so many good documentaries, too. This feels real. These are real people. Wiebe's wife. I mean, all of it, all of the characters here just, you know, they're not characters, obviously. They're real people, but they're more interesting as characters than in most fictional films.
And it's even beautifully done. There's that scene where Wiebe is drumming and he's drawing on the Donkey Kong screen. He's trying to dissect how Mario jumps. It's just beautiful.
Well, that's the thing about, you know, a lot of these guys. They're really, really smart guys. They're not just video game geeks. And I'm glad to hear that you are the king of Kong.
I am.
Based on all those viewings, my friend. Okay, coming up next, Will Ferrell skates to victory in our video segment.
Side-by-side skate clash.
First, here's a look at what's coming up on next week's show.
You're not all bad. Yes, I am. We're gonna go back out into this mess and shoot something.
This week's video segment is brought to you by Raisinets. Make a deliciously smart choice with Raisinets.
Before a big competition, I like to work with leather. The Native Americans always said that working with hides and pelts releases the soul. These are a couple diaper bags I made for Faith Hill.
There's Will Ferrell doing a sports comedy. He never does that. Actually, I kind of like Blades of Glory, and I also like You're the Dog, which was kind of an overlooked, quirky little film with a nice performance from Molly Shannon.
You're the Dog is okay. Blades of Glory, absolutely not. But I don't hold it against you.
Thank you. Thanks for. I don't want you to hold anything against me, and
just
we'll get
myself.
Along just fine.
My video pick, my friend, is a box set of old movies from a master. Criterion Collections package of the first films of Samuel Fuller. And though they all date back to the late 40s and early 50s, when the war vet turned newspaper man was breaking through on the big screen, there is not a dud in the Wild Bunch. The collection consists of 2 westerns, I Shot Jesse James and the Baron of Arizona, and The Steel Helmet, the first film made about the Korean War.
So long, Buddha-head. When I get out of this, I'm going to join the Air Force. No more beetle crushing for me.
Oh, be smart. There's nothing like the infantry.
And The Baron of Arizona is especially fascinating, if only because it contains the greatest performance of Vincent Price's underrated career.
Even better than Dr. Phibes. That's a bold statement.
I know. I'm going out on a limb.
And I'll tell you this much, my friend. I bet when Sam Fuller was working as a newspaperman, he didn't have a library research assistant doing all his work for him like Josh Hartnett did.
Good Lord, I didn't like the movie. What are you holding it against me?
What can I tell you? The first films of Sam Fuller available now. Blades of Glory and You're the Dog will be in stores on Tuesday. We'll be back to recap this week's show right after this.
Closed captioning for Ebert and Roeper is sponsored by...
Man has evolved to the point where he no longer needs to stand in line for tickets. The MovieTickets.card, available only at MovieTickets.com.
Okay, recapping the movies in this week's show, we pretty much had seething hatred for everything, except for The King of Kong. We loved it. It's a great film. Check it out. And I want to say thank you, but also I'm sorry for the movies you saw in this week's show.
What a terrible week.
Except for The King of Kong.
King of Kong.
Which redeems
Makes up
everything.
for the whole year.
There you go.
I'm glad I got to be on this show to talk about that particular gem.
There you go, my friend. All right, that's it for this week. Until next week, the balcony is closed.
Shop for car insurance at Progressive.com and get all the information you need to make the best decision in about 8 minutes. Go to Progressive.com today.
Oh, those are so cute. I know. I love my Skechers. What would I do without my Skechers, right? I know. I love them. Skechers. Perfect styles, perfect comfort.
Net Zero gives you the fastest surfing available over dial-up and virus protection, starting at $9.95. Try it risk-free for 30 days with our money-back guarantee.
Shop for car insurance at Progressive.com and get all the information you need to make the best decision in about 8 minutes. Go to Progressive.com today.